Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. So in today's video, I'm going to be answering one of the most frequently or most commonly asked question of me when I was putting out my call for Q&A questions in my May wrap up when I made my return to BookTube after getting married and things like that. I talked about how I had given away books as wedding favors, and a bunch of people just wanted to know more details about how that worked, the logistics behind it, the books I gave away, any information it seems like. And I don't blame you because I would be the same way. So I thought I would just make an entire video just talking about this whole process, kind of some details behind our wedding that, fed into this stuff. And then also just provide a list of the books that we gave away at our wedding and kind of how that all worked out. So to provide a little bit of background, originally Albert and I were not planning on giving away favors or anything like that. For the most part, in my opinion, favors are a waste of money. Wedding favors are a waste of money. Unless it's something edible, most of the time wedding favors get left behind or just thrown in the trash, things like that. And we didn't want to spend money on things that people would just throw away. And so in our heads, we were like, well, maybe we'll do food or something along those lines. But I joined a bunch of wedding related Reddit boards while I was wedding planning because they provided a lot of context and information and just general support throughout wedding planning. But it's real that you need a little bit of support while you're wedding planning because it's a lot. So anyways, on one of those wedding planning subreddits, there was someone who made a post basically talking about how they had a mini book fair at their wedding. So I can't get a lot of credit, or I don't think I deserve a lot of credit for this idea because I took it from someone else. Although I do recognize that's how a lot of wedding things happen, is you see inspiration somewhere else. So it's not like this is a brand new concept that I came up with all on my own. I saw this on Reddit and I was like, this is a great idea. I made a comment on that thread. I'll have a link to it down below so you can see it in case you're interested. And I even messaged the person who made that original post to talk to them about it because I was like, I want to do this for our wedding. And so I eventually convinced my now husband to let me do this. He was not on board originally because he was very convinced that most people would not be interested in this, which I don't blame him for. Generally speaking, not a lot of people are book readers. Not a lot of people spend their leisurely time reading books. The surveys out there say people read on average one book a year. And so in his head, he thought this might be a futile wedding favor. And the reason why I was able to convince him to get on board with this was because I knew that within the people that we were inviting, within my friends, my family, and some of his friends that I had met and things like that, there are people who do enjoy reading. So at least those people would get something out of it. And you'll see the way it all worked out, we wouldn't really be losing money in this case. And so once it became a thing that my husband got on board with, what I did is I started reaching out to bookstores in the area. So I live in the Chicago suburbs and our wedding was taking place within the city of Chicago itself. So I started reaching out to Chicago bookstores. I reached out to a couple. One of them I reached out to because it's just location wise was really close to our venue. Another one was just one that I really enjoyed, and I didn't get responses back from them, or I got responses saying that they didn't have the ability to do this or they weren't interested in doing it, things along those lines. And so I was just this is totally fine. I recognize that these are small businesses with staff and all this stuff. And I wasn't expecting everyone to be able to have the capacity for this. But I was able to find a bookstore that was willing to partner with me. It's Roscoe Books in Roscoe Village. If you live in the Chicago area, you may or may not have known of it. I knew of Roscoe Books because there are people who either currently or used to work at Roscoe Books that used to work at Book Riot, and I also used to work at Book Riot, and so we actually knew each other from Book Riot first, and then Roscoe Books became a thing, and I'd gone to Roscoe Books before, I'd met the owner before and things like that. And so I reached out to her and was just like, hey, I don't know if you remember me. We had talked before. I used to work at Book Riot with, those other people and all this stuff. And I'm wondering if you're interested in doing this for my wedding. And immediately the owner, Erica, was super excited, super on board. And so, yeah, it worked out really well. So I reached out to Erica in January of 2023. Our wedding was in April. And I reached out relatively early just to one, figure out whether this was actually going to happen or not. And then two, I just didn't know how the process would work on her end in terms of ordering books and buying books and getting things ready and all that stuff. I wanted to make sure she had plenty of time to do what she needed to do to be prepared for the wedding. But after having like an initial conversation with her in January, she basically told me she only needed like 2 to 3 weeks really to order books, assuming that they were all like relatively easily accessible, like all in print and things like that, based on like the way her ordering system is set up and stuff like that. Generally speaking, she would only need a couple of weeks in order to place the order to have it in time for the wedding, which I was like, great, I'll get you a list of books by the end of March. So what my husband and I did is we made a list of some of our favorite books. One of the things we took into consideration was like whether this book would be something that would appeal to other people. So there are books that like both of us have read where we're like, I don't know if we should necessarily recommend this book to like a broad audience of people because it feels a little slightly more like niche. And then there's other things that we took into account. Like, for example, both of us really love the comic series Saga. He really loves it. Like, he's caught up. I am not. But we were both like, well, if we're going to offer a comic, we're going to offer the first volume. And the first volume has some very explicit things both on the cover as well as within the first couple of pages. And knowing that we were having a wedding with a broad spectrum of people, including children, like, yes, we would love to give that comic away to people, but also it's probably not smart to just have that lying on a table without warning people ahead of time what they could potentially be getting themselves into. And so we just made conscious choices like that because we just wanted to minimize the drama. Because if you've planned a wedding before, you know that there's lots of drama all the time. And so just trying to minimize the drama, minimize the headaches, and try to pick books that would appeal to people in slightly more broad sense. I did a little bit more work on this than him, partially because I read more than him, and partially because like I became very like hyper focused on this going well. And so I started to be like, okay, this is a list of books that I would potentially put on here. And then I realized like there are gaps. I'm like, okay, what's a really good romantic book that I could read that could potentially be on this list? Or what's a really good fantasy book that I could read that could be on this list? That's not like an uber popular fantasy and not one that I've recommended a million times. But then I was like, you know, books that I've recommended before really don't matter because I'm recommending them also to like his family now and all of this stuff. And I had like big plans to like do like shelf talkers for some of these. Did not work out. You know, time is of the essence and there's certain things that have to get left behind. So I didn't do that. But what I did do is I provided Erica with a list of around 40 books from both Albert and I. And I gave her kind of like a priority list. So I highlighted in green the ones that I really wanted to have on the table. And then the ones in yellow were ones where I was like, this would be nice to have, but if you can't get it, that's totally fine. And then like the other ones were just sort of like, if it's available, you know, these could potentially go well for the people that are coming to this wedding. And then the other thing I did was give her a basic breakdown of like our guest list. So I told her there were, I think, 125 people coming to our wedding, and I had like age breakdowns for everyone. So I was like, this is the amount of 18 plus people. And then I gave her some age ranges for the kids' books because children's lit is not an area that I am comfortable with. I don't know what's out there. There were like a couple of kids' books that we had on the list because I just heard of them from other people. There were a couple of kids' books that like Albert read when he was younger that he just wanted on there and stuff like that. And so we were able to get those. But this is where I like told her, I was like, this is where I need you to sort of fill in the gaps for me. I don't have any knowledge in these areas. And so please like provide kids books, and this is the amount of kids that we're going to have. So have more than that available because I could see like parents using their token, I'll get to that in a second, for their kid. And then outside of that list of books, I also told her like, feel free to bring more books from your bookstore. We talked about potentially having her sell books at the wedding, but then she was just like, no, it's going to get a little too complicated with that. Trying to keep track of like who got a free book and who's paying for a book. And she was going to be working it by herself. And so in the end, we decided we would just give one book to every person and no one would be able to get more than one book unless they had more than one token, which again, I will get to. So yes, I gave her a list of books. I told her to fill in the gaps in the kids lit and like middle school, young adult areas. And then I also told her that she could bring additional books on top of this, like things that she knows sells really well in her bookstore. Bring a couple more nonfiction because that's not necessarily an area that I focus on a lot. Things like that to sort of like round off the offering of like how this was going to work. And so from there, she went ahead and ordered a bunch of books. I think she was able to get all of the green books that we asked for, and she was able to get like most of the yellow books that we marked. And then she, like I said, filled in the gaps, things like that. Our venue came with a wedding planner, which was super nice, super helpful. And also like our wedding ceremony and our reception was all in one venue. We were just on the second floor for the ceremony and then came down to the first floor for the reception and cocktail hour. And so we had someone like on site to help coordinate all of this stuff as a wedding coordinator does. And so we CC'd our coordinator on all the emails so that way she was on the loop about everything that was going on. There was one day when we did a walkthrough at the venue when it got closer to the wedding, and we talked about a lot of the logistics when it came to this as well as other stuff. And so we talked about like how we were going to set up the tables for this, where we wanted it to be in terms of like where in the space. And so we had it so the book fair was set up in our cocktail hour space and it would only be open during cocktail hour. And she had like two, I would say like 8-foot long tables that were set up in kind of an L formation. And then all of the books were laid out on the table. And then what we did is for our wedding, since it was a relatively small wedding, at least for us, like my sister's wedding was a giant Indian wedding with 800 plus people. So our wedding was really small for like both my family as well as my husband's family. And so what we did is we printed out programs for the ceremony, and then paper clipped to each program was a ticket, which my husband's a graphic designer, so he designed all of this stuff, all of our paper goods. And so he designed a little ticket, and so we spent a day like cutting them out, and then we paper clipped them to the programs themselves, and then we put a program on every seat. And then at the end of our ceremony, our officiant, my pastor, or our pastor now, made an announcement basically explaining what was going to happen. And so the way we had it work was that everyone got a single ticket with their program. And so you could redeem that ticket for a free book downstairs. And the thing that we found out afterwards, like meaning like everyone told us during the reception, was like how much they loved it. Like apparently like people heard that announcement and like ran downstairs to go get a book and like get their dibs on a book before anyone else could. I know like one of my cousin's kids, like they were going around stealing tickets from other people because they wanted multiple books. It was absolutely it was chaos apparently. Like we had a couple of people, like some of our family stayed back a little bit so we could take family photos during cocktail hour. And apparently by the time they got down there, like things were really picked over, which again, like my husband and I were not expecting that. Like we were expecting some people to be really excited by the book fair idea, but literally everyone was excited. Like even people who I wouldn't have expected to get a book and people who I know didn't get a book, they still like came up to us and were like, oh, this is such a cute idea. Like this is so very us. Everyone knows basically that I'm a reader and that I have like all of this YouTube stuff and talk on social media about books and things like that, or at least people who had met me before. And like even some of his family knew this about me ahead of time. So like people were very encouraging of it and really were excited by it. Like I was genuinely so shocked. Like everyone told us that they absolutely loved the idea. And it seems like people were really excited about the books that they picked up, which is great. So yeah, overall, it was a huge, huge success. My husband afterwards was like, look, I'm going to admit it. You were right. This was a good thing to do for our wedding because everyone thoroughly enjoyed it. So those are basically all of the logistics behind how this happened. So the way it worked in terms of like money and all that stuff, we basically agreed that any book that I gave away, we would pay for. And then we were also paying for her time and things like that. So she gave us like an hourly rate. Basically, she was going to charge us for. She had like a list of books that she ordered specifically for us. And then she basically just like cross-referenced that to see like which ones didn't like get given away, which were only a handful, so I'm assuming it was relatively easy for her. Those we wouldn't be charged for, and she would just put those as stock, because basically all of the books that we asked for were books that she said she would probably stock if she didn't already stock in store. And so she was willing to just keep those and just sell them in her store, which was very nice of her as well. And so in the end, let's see, I have like my paper here from her. She gave us a nice little printout of everything, which was, you know, mostly for our own curiosity, because we were so curious about what the books were, because by the time we got down there after taking photos and everything, all the books were gone basically. So we just had to like ask people what they got, and so we asked for a printout as well from her. So in the end, there were 47 titles that were out on the tables, and we gave away 111 books total. The total cost was $1,652, but we did get a discount from her because she considered it a bulk purchase. And so she does like ordering for like book clubs and things like that. And so like if you order over a certain quantity, you get a discount. But with the discount and then also with her like charging for her time, it came out to around $1,600. And so, I mean, you know, you can say whether or not that was or was not a lot of money. In my head, based on what I know about weddings and stuff like that, you know, it can be considered pricey, but in my head it was worth it. So of the 47 titles, I believe 31 of them were ones that we had requested specifically. And so I thought I would just really quickly go through the books that we had on the tables and the amount that we gave away. I believe everything is represented here, like all of the leftover books were just extra copies of what was listed here. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the full list of books. I'm going to have information on the screen that has the quantity that we gave away, as well as whether or not it was a book recommended by me or my husband. So there is A First Time for Everything by Dan Santat, B is for Bear by Roger Priddy, Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson, Black Sun by Rebecca Rowanhorse, Book of Unknown Americans by Christina Henriquez, By the Book by Jasmine Guillory, The Newest Dogman, which is Dogman 20,000 Fleas. I actually don't know the full title of this. It'll be on the screen, by Dave Pikey. Finlay Donovan is Killing It by Al Casamano. From Scratch by Tembi Locke. From the Desk of Zoe Washington by Janae Marks. Good Talk by Mira Jacob. Homegoing by Ya Jesse. House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica Sanchez. If I Never Met You by Mari McFarlane. Kitten's First Full Moon by Kevin Henkels. Last Summer on State Street by Toya Wolf. Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. March Book 1 by John Lewis. Mixed, A Colorful Story by Ari Chung. New Dark Age by James Brittle. New Kid by Jerry Kraft. Olga Dies Dreaming by Joshi Gonzalez. Pages and Company by Anna James. Pashmina by Nidhi Chanani. Portrait of a Thief by Grace Lee. Queen of the Tiles by Hannah L. Koff. Ramen for Everyone by Patri Tenenhardri. Messed up that one. Salt Houses by Hala Aliyan. Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. Static Season 1 by Vita Yala. Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. The Davenports by Crystal Marquis. The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Henri Jeffers. The Orchard by David Hopin. The Startup Wife by Tamima Anam. The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali. The Undocumented Americans by Vila Vicenci Cornejo. The Widows of Malabar Hill by Sujata Masi. These Precious Days by Ann Patchett. Thief Lord by Cornelia Funke. This Golden State by Merritt Weisenberg. This is the Planet Where I Live by K.L. Going. True Biz by Sarah Novick. And White Tears, Brown Scars by Ruby Hamad. So, yes, overall, very excited about the way it all went. Very happy and very grateful for Optical Books for partnering with us on this, and very excited that it just worked so well. So feel free to leave any questions or comments that you have down in the comment section below. I'm happy to talk about this more if there's anything that I missed, or if you have any follow-up questions based on anything that I said here, feel free to leave that down in the comment section. I'll have a bunch of links down in the comment section as well to the bookstore, to the Reddit thread, to our photographer who was amazing and whose pictures I featured that showed the books and things like that. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.